Yes, good morning. You're still watching Citizen Extra, the Friday edition with me, Fred Indemuli. We now want to move the discussion forward. The National Cohesion and Integration Commission, in conjunction with the Communications Authority, has reviewed guidelines on dissemination and undesirable bulk political content through electronic media. Now, this has effectively banned the use of vernacular in sending bulk political text messages, which will now only be in English and Swahili. Does this in any way infringe on the right of freedom of expression? Is this the right way to go about this matter? Joining me now in studio, we do have Sandra Ochola, analyst, Gabriel Muduma, as well as Aidan Cabello. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This particular issue that we now want to discuss has just come this week. It's one of the latest adjustments to the guidelines on dissemination of undesirable bulk political content. Now, we do understand where these two organizations are coming from. Yes, use of vernacular, especially in media during the 2007 election, is said to have contributed largely to the kind of violence that we saw. But now, banning text messages written in vernacular, do you think is the best way to go? Could it be counterproductive? What do we say about vernacular radio stations, vernacular TV, or use of vernacular during the campaign trail? Sandra Ochola, what is your take on this?
Like you rightly said, Fred, their heart is in a good place. That's what I believe. However, I think they're opening themselves to legal and even constitutional challenges in the future, because we have a constitution that guarantees various rights. Article 44, for instance, talks about the right to language and culture, and it specifically provides that every person has the right to use their culture, to associate, the right to use their language as a form of cultural expression, and they're allowed to form institutions and bodies through which they can use their language and participate in the cultural affairs of their community. And that, I believe, is what the vernacular stations are doing. The same constitution at Article 33 now provides for the freedom of expression, like you rightly articulated, and it says every person has the right to seek, to receive, and to impart information. However, the same article then provides that whatever information you'll be propagating, then it should not be used as a form of incitement. It should not be used to propagate war or hate speech. And I think it's that point where the Commission should have focused on, where it says that our mandate is to ensure that there's no hate speech during the election period, and the institutions that are required to enhance accountability on issues of politics, on issues of hate speech, on issues of freedom of expression are held accountable. So my heart really goes out to the voters in particular, and with a lot of focus on those marginalized communities that necessarily don't speak English or find it more comfortable to speak their local language. And my misgiving is, as a country, we've gotten to a point where we are legislating on everything. We have regulations, we have laws, we have policies on each and every topic. And for me, that shows a situation where, as a community, we've gotten to a level where we are becoming unruly, so to speak, where we need accountability measures put for us at each and every point. And I don't think that's something that's good, especially for the future generations.
Aidan Cabello, do you agree with Sandra that yes, this is probably one of those areas in which we are trying to over-legislate or to over-regulate? That fine, probably we may understand when it comes to cosmopolitan areas, areas where people speak more than one language, but in some areas which predominantly speak one particular language, sending a text message to them in that language will now be illegal?
Well, Fred, I think it's difficult for people to be to legislate. I mean, people's life to that extent. We don't need laws to be in our homes to that extent. But I think the spirit in which this guideline is given is what I would like to speak to. Kenyan politics is actually more tribal, and that's the whole mess and the undoing in this country. We're trying to whip tribal, cohesion instead of building a national cohesion. And tribal cohesion can only be built using the local language, and if you listen to the local languages, they are very emotive. Some of the languages, some of the words that are used locally are very emotive and very incisive. if you listen to them, more than if you speak in Swahili, the same words in Swahili or English, it will not be as emotive to the people. So my my take on this is, it's good to give guidelines, but you cannot take people to court for speaking their language. You can only punish people for using the language wrongly. So if we monitor the kind of messages that are brought, that are sent, not only on text messages actually, even on meetings, when politicians go out and meet with their kins, what do they tell them at night?
And that is a question, because now when the Communications Authority come out and the NCIC and they say political parties cannot use vernacular when they give out this bulk messages on text, as part of campaigning. But what therefore do you say to someone, because you've seen even the president going to campaign in areas in Mount Kenya where at some point or the other he switches to vernacular? We've seen Raila Odinga going to Nyanza and at some point he switches to his vernacular. Are we going to say that that should also be stopped?
No, I don't think we can stop that, because what is important is what message are we giving to those people.
Yes.
Because some of these areas you go to, they don't understand Kiswahili, they don't understand English, so how do you communicate to them? So as a leader, I would go to my people and talk to them in my language, the language that they understand, so that they understand what I'm talking about. But what is important is what I'm telling them insightful, or the right messages for them to make the right decision.
So you do not support that general ban on
I don't think so. I don't think it's even workable, because you cannot tell people in Kiswahili when they don't understand Kiswahili or English. If I go to Merti, for instance, in Isiolo County, people in Merti, people in Sericho, people in Garbatula, they don't understand English and Swahili. Most of them have not gone to school. So
but are they able to read? Because probably they're saying anyone who's able to read the vernacular should be able to understand English or Swahili better.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm saying most of these messages are not even in text messages. Most of these inciting messages are in actual oral language. So instead of concentrating on messages, let's also focus on oral messages that politicians are giving out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gabriel Muduma, do you agree that probably this ban on vernacular use in text messages in particular could be misplaced? Because vernacular radio is something that has grown in leaps and bounds over the last few years. Vernacular radio is probably one of the biggest radio that we have. Even vernacular TVs now. Discussions, political discussions and campaigns are being carried out in vernacular as we speak. Discussions, analysis are being done in vernacular. So when you ban text messages, what are you saying?
Thank you, Fred. Number one, let me start by agreeing with what my two good colleagues have actually said. It's not only a serious legislation, it's also quite impractical, given the fact that you know, we have an internet that we all said we do not want our internet regulated, and you know, it follows within the paradigm shift of sending a text message. I think it's one and the same technology. So when you come to say that you're going to ban sending the bulk messages in vernacular language, you have to actually start from the practicalness of such an exercise. And what comes to play, really, you've mentioned issues of vernacular radio, vernacular TV, which are actually catching root by the day. So actually they go in tandem, and like my good friend, the candidate for Isiolo, has actually put it, you know, much of it is not in legible form. It's actually what we see on what we hear on our FM stations. So I think it's going to be very hard to legislate that particular key exercise, and I don't see how it's going to be practical. But there are two things, Fred, that we need to bring and actually make our viewers understand. One of them is, you know, apart from SMSs, you have the other opportunistic technologies that come with the internet. You have, you know, things like the WhatsApp, you have you have other technologies like Snapchat, you have Viber. You know, somebody who can, if you're looking to mass distribute anything, you can use those technologies, you know. So if you're going to ban it on text message, what are you going to do on these, you know, these other technologies? So really what comes to play is the practicalness of such, you know, a directive. And I think when you start addressing people who actually may not understand what we call the lingua franca, you know, like in Kenya is English, and you know, somebody will tell you our national language is Kiswahili. There are are so many people actually who, not only feigning ignorance, they for sure do not know. Mashambani, I mean, if you're looking at somebody who is going out there to campaign, all right, in their homeland, and half of those people don't understand English and some of them don't understand Swahili, what language are you going to use? So probably what could have happened, and in my view, this would have been probably the best directive for the authorities to take, you know, when you're talking about the NSIS and people like the Communication Authority. I think the best directive they should have gone for, Fred, is to have the message sent to them earlier. They look at it, they see whether it contains any message that could actually create a situation where peace can be eroded, yes, and then allow it for mass distribution. That at the very least.
And as I speak, I'm holding in my hand that document. It's titled Guidelines for Prevention of Dissemination of Undesirable Bulk Political SMS and Social Media Content via Electronic Communications Network. It is a very huge document, and it outlines quite a number of those things. But on that particular issue, what you've raised is that if you want to send a message, prior to sending a political message, CSPs shall make a request, and I'm thinking these are political parties, shall make a request, right, at least 48 hours before sending the message. So therefore, this one will be vetted, the message will be vetted, but then they go ahead and say it can only be in English or Swahili.
Thank you, Fred. You see, the vetting, in actually, that's actually practical. Vet the message, and then if it passes the threshold of what you call, you know, of what you, I mean, you put out there, then allow it
in whatever language.
Exactly, because really, I mean, people will go to court and they'll say half of our voters in Mashinani don't understand the languages that you want us to, yes, actually bring forward. So when you come to the issue of languages, it is so impractical to just put it on 2 languages. I don't think it will see the light of day.
And I think it's important to mention that one of my panelists is a candidate. When Aidan Kabelo is vying for the governor's seat in Isiolo County. Yes, is that correct? Yeah. On an ODM party ticket. Of course, when you go campaigning in Isiolo, I'm sure you must use, sometimes you're forced to use, to switch to that, a language that they do understand. Do you think that verbatim, or when you use that language on the campaign trail, do you think it's different when you use it on text, that probably when you write it down, it can be deemed more offensive than when you speak?
Yeah, Fred, when I go to the ground and I use, for instance, the Vernacular radio in Isiolo, one of the most popular ones. Angaf radio program is one of the most listened in Kiborana. And when I go to this radio, and the huge amount of audience that resonates with my message is quite overwhelming, and so I find it very useful and easy to reach people than text, because 80% of the people that I am looking for votes from cannot read and write. Mm-hmm. So really, that kind of text messages isn't very useful for me. The people who actually are much on the text messages are the youth who are using Facebook, WhatsApp, and that kind of media. Are the ones who are on Facebook and other chats. But the majority, the women, the elders, they listen to vernacular radio. So I think if it is to be monitored, you can't legislate and restrict the use of language, but what is important is to monitor the messages in those. And unfortunately, I mean, now if I go to that radio, how will they check what I am going to say before that? Because, yes, I mean, they can't legislate that.
It's easier to regulate text messages as opposed to verbal communication on radio or on a campaign platform somewhere when you're addressing a rally.
Yeah, you see, Fred, even text messages. For instance, we have a group chat. Tell me how CCK is going to check before on that discussion, because it's a group. It's just a live chat that we are having, like what we are having now. Nobody can tell me what to write and what not to write at that particular moment. What I've heard is that they are going to hold the group admins responsible. I don't know how that's going to be practical because the group admin does not control what I want to write in that chat.
Sandra, do you get a feeling that probably even the Communications Authority way in over their heads that probably they don't understand where technology has developed to in terms of the level of communication, because text messages, surely.
Yeah. It's quite a challenge, and I think, like I said initially, they're opening, both institutions might face a number of legal and constitutional challenges. Oral communication is our basic form of communication, and you see technology coming in later, social media, WhatsApp, and all these other platforms that we've now come up with. They are means of us propagating the messages that we seek to share amongst us. And given the political period, like I said earlier, their heart is in a good place, but they're going to have trouble enforcing this. And the unfortunate thing about it also is that we are propagating a culture where we are criminalizing cultural expression within the community, which is something wrong. For as long as the Constitution provides that everyone has a right to language and culture, for as long as the Constitution provides that everyone has a freedom of expression, we should find means and ways of self-regulating as a community, self-regulating as a people, and particularly for the younger generation, so that we are telling them it is not wrong for you to express yourself in a particular way. It is not wrong for you to have some pride in your language. It is not wrong for you to have your pride in your ethnic affiliation. But you should also be responsible as a Kenyan. You should be responsible as a future leader of the country.
Yes, and I think you just hit the nail right on the head when you said it looks like an attempt to criminalize culture or use of culture and language. But tribal politics is something that we are very alive to, and we know that that is the biggest problem in our politics, that the use of negative ethnicity. When it comes to the issue of cohesion, do you think that what the Communications Authority and the NCIC, which is supposed to be promoting national cohesion, do you think that this kind of regulations is the best way to go about it? That even politicians, when it comes to their party manifestos, which were launched early this week, when it comes to issues of addressing national cohesion, none of them really went deep in addressing this problem. That everyone, yes, they give probably even a priority, and they say number one on our manifesto, addressing and promoting national cohesion, but beyond that generalized statement of intent, they do not break it down and say how you will do it. Therefore, you leave it to NCIC to start coming up with such laws that don't use vernacular. Gabriel Muzuma.
Actually, Fred, you've put it very well. You've actually also nailed, you know,
I've done an analysis already.
Totally, and I agree with you 110%. But also, just to edify what Sandra has also said, she's put it also quite eloquently that when you want to forge ahead in matters culture and you come up with such laws, you know, you are actually, you know, you are strangling that very law that allow people to engage into what I would call positive ethnicity, which we all need. I mean, we have a rich culture which is quite diverse, and we must enjoy it. Now, when Sandra says their heart is in the right place, I also agree with her 110%. Their intentions could be right, but the way of going about it, I don't think it will hold any traction. And this is why I think they may go ahead and spend so much money, and actually this may not gain any traction.
Yes.
Because I look at two dimensions, you know, when you talk about, you know, people who are engaged so much orally with what somebody puts in on a text message, and then try to control that very technology. Number one, it is even very hard, Fred, and you know very well, it's very hard to control politicians when they hold a microphone. So how are you going to do it well when they are seated in the confines of their you know, party headquarters, or at their homes, or wherever they like hanging out, and somebody with their own smartphone sending out text messages, when you know very well, in a place where you can actually try and confine them, in, you know, some place like here, it is very hard for you to even tell our good governor candidate what he's going to say. You cannot hold him to such.
Yes.
But you see, there are laws that you have put in place where you can actually, you're not, you know, you absolve yourself for whatever.
But when it comes to issues like this, that we are all in agreement that probably the solution is not legislative, that probably we do not need more laws, then what is the solution?
It is quite moral. Let's put it that way, because we know what such could lead, and that's why I'm agreeing with Sandra when they say the authorities, their heart is in the right place, but the way of doing it could be wrong and may not gain traction. So it comes back to the moral sphere. We saw what such words, or what, meaningless, or let me not call them meaningless, when you put up text messages that can infuriate, some that can actually bring the country down, literally burn it. We've seen what it can do. I mean, we have a very good case study in 2007, 2008, and we've seen what that can do. So it comes back to the moral aspect. Are we holding ourselves, are the politicians themselves holding themselves accountable when they disseminate such information? Is the voter knowledgeable enough, to ignore when such messages come on board to their devices? Are we able, to see the undertones that some of these messages are carried? Because half of the time we saw somebody make, a scathing message in Kajiado, and I don't want to talk about it, but then again, when they came out to interpret that, you could tell they were actually trying very hard to try and water down what had been said earlier. So we are going to struggle with this, Fred. But at the end of the day, I think the onus is on the Kenyan people to maintain peace and really try as much as possible not to ignite, the country with text messages. Let's not really, water down the very same freedoms that our constitution has allowed.
And I want the conversation now to head and tie down this issue of national cohesion with the party manifestos launched earlier this week, because yes, probably this is some of the things that they need to be handling, but yes, and both party manifestos, let's be fair to them, mention issues to do with national cohesion. But do you think they missed an opportunity this time around to actually address, so that they say, because organizations like the NCIC need resources, they say they do not have enough powers, but is any of this political grouping that's seeking to take over the regime, or to rather continue running the country, is any of them alive to the fact that cohesion, national cohesion, is a big issue and needs to be addressed? And do you think any of the two groupings has a solution, Bwana Aiden?
Yeah, thank you, Fred. Just before that, I wanted to mention that one of the most insightful media, besides the text messages, is also music, where traditional music is composed. We've heard of many traditional communities composing songs in praise of other people and to demean others, which is something very sad. And music has a lot of power to influence people's way of behavior. So I think the restricting it on text messages alone isn't going to go anywhere, and it's not going to be effective. Now, coming back to the issues of this and the manifestos, I think both, as you said, both manifestos have talked about national cohesion, and this is something we have been talking a lot for the many years that we've been in this politics. But politics in this country is deeply tribalized. So how do we detribalize the politics of this country so that people are not electing leaders because of it's one of their own, but they're electing leaders because they're capable and they know this is what this politician or this leader is going to deliver. So unfortunately, we haven't gone far in detribalizing our politics. We are still in tribal politics. But if you look at my party, the manifesto that we have, the ODM,
that's the NASA manifesto. The
NASA manifesto recognizes that division in the country. And one of the things that we want to heal this country is the division caused by the inequalities, caused by atrocities that has been committed. We've just seen on the media the way brutality of the regimes that has been impacted on people. We have had this country going through a TJRC process, judicial process that looked at how can we heal this country? What has happened to these communities? And how can these communities be part of this country? And that report elaborated on what measures to be taken for this country to become one country instead of 42 or 43 tribes. Can we make one country? Some of the solutions that are suggested there are still lying on the shelf. NASA is saying we will take that report to the public, we'll debate that report to the public, just like what South Africa did.
Okay.
You know, we will implement that. That's part of the...
Allow me to stop you there, because I meant to understand we're just about to take some breaking news. We do understand Gigi Kariuki, Senator Gigi Kariuki has passed on.
Wow.
And that's the senator for Laikipia, who also served as a cabinet minister in Jomo Kenyatta and Moi's governments. That's veteran politician Gigi Kariuki has died at a Nairobi hospital, aged 79 years old. He is a current senator for Laikipia, and he has also served as cabinet minister in both the Jomo Kenyatta and Daniel Arap Moi governments. We'll continue giving you updates on that particular breaking news. Yes, Aidan, you continued saying, explaining how NASA manifesto has addressed that issue of national cohesion.
Yeah, and then look at how what the constitution of this country, or even the statistics of this country, how they have put people into different tribes. I mean, if you look at the statistics of tribes in this country, you know what number are this tribe, what number are this tribe, and the rest of the rest who are not recognized are said others. Who are others? You know, how do if I am, for instance, a minority, and my tribe is not recognized, then I am not recognized. That's how people feel. You know that they have been.
So, Aidan, if I get you clearly, you say, in as far as addressing the cohesion issue, NASA has said it will implement the TJRC report.
Yes.
Yes, that's simple. Implement the TJRC report, and that will sort out it. Is it that simple, Sandra, that implementing the TJRC report will actually cure the malady that we have as ethnic negative ethnicity, especially when it comes to our politics?
It is not the only solution, but it is part of the solution. If northern Kenya is going to be part of this country, then that debate of how to heal the past atrocities done by the previous regimes must be addressed and taken into. Then the other thing is about the distribution of the national cake. Look, the spirit of the Constitution 2010 was to make every part of this country own this country, because in the initial Constitution everything was centralized. I can tell you, for the first time in the history of Kenya, 50 years after independence, Wajir has seen tarmac last year, courtesy of the devolution. You know, this is something that would never have happened. So if we entrench devolution, instead of what we're saying as NASA is, let's have more devolved to the counties. We know there's a lot of corruption that's happening all over the place. That's a different matter that can be handled. But if we devolve more resources to the poor counties, or to the communities out away from the center, then we'll have everybody develop. And once we develop, once we have institutions, once we have roads, once we have infrastructure, then the whole concept of competition and tribalism will slowly fade away over time. So it is about development.
Okay, Sandra, do you agree with Bwana Aidan Kabelo that yes, it's about development and implementation of the TJRC, and any manifesto that addresses that probably has it right?
Fred, I'd like to take a different approach and say issues of peace, healing and reconciliation in this country are the worst topics to politicize, regardless of which manifesto provided the mechanisms they want to deal with it. And I'm saying this because, and perhaps if I could speak on behalf of the generation that I represent, I think it's getting to a point where as young people we are tired of participating in wars that we did not create. And I think all these things that we are seeing, we are treating symptoms as opposed to treating the real issues. And for me, two issues arise from there. One is our understanding of what exactly do we want. What do we understand by the term peace? Is it the absence of conflict and war only? What is our understanding of reconciliation? Is it people sitting down and having coffee post-election period? What is our understanding of healing? Is it individuals saying that, oh, we've forgiven each other, and people appearing in the media? I think as a community, for as long as we are not coming to a common understanding of what the key underlying issues are, then we still have a problem. And then you find in instances where we have at least some form of understanding of what our real issues are, we lack the commitment to see it through. And I think this is political commitment, social commitment, cultural commitment. And that's what I'm saying. I want to take a different approach from it.
Do you think, for example, there's room for political parties to actually address this issue, or help us address this issue? Maybe not 100% from their side, but do you think that probably there's an opportunity for political parties that probably even put it in their manifestos that can actually aid in as far as getting it right, as you put it?
I do agree. Our political leaders have a role to play in ensuring that the country moves towards the direction it's supposed to move. But then I'll emphasize again the need to show commitment. You don't just talk about it, but indeed you show you have systems and structures within your political parties, within the structures that you're dealing in, to ensure that you're promoting peace. And there's one thing that I was talking with a couple of friends as regards the Jubilee nominations. I think there was a story about a young man, they called him Gearbox, who was nominated in the Central region. And for me, that is one story that as a political party is something that should be promoted, where you can say that a Luo is able to be nominated or elected within a Kikuyu dominated area. You go to Nyanza, you say the Kikuyus and other tribes that are able to be nominated or even elected. And I think those are the actions that we need to see as opposed to rhetoric.
Okay, Bwana Gabriel Muduma, what's your thoughts your thoughts about this issue? Because yes, as Sandra put it, it is a very touchy issue, but even in terms of political commitment, do you think that either Jubilee or NASA, and just looking at their manifestos and their general statements when it comes to national cohesion, do you think any of them is committed towards addressing this issue?
Fred, first of all, let's give me 1 minute to actually send our condolences to our dearly departed Senator Gigi Kariuki, and we all know the kind of service that he's offered to this country. So to his beloved family and friends, I think we issue that part of condolence. Coming to your question, I think Sandra has mentioned one good name which you've also alluded to, and that's commitment. When you look at somebody saying that we are going to adopt a TJRC report, Fred, I think we wasted a very good chance to adapting and actually realizing that particular process of the TJRC. All these things were captured in the agenda for that Kriegler left, and it was a very good blueprint. And I'm liking the fact that Aden has actually said it, that it is gaining dust in somebody else's shelf. So the word commitment right then erodes the whole process, because you are asking yourself, 10 years removed from 2007, and you know, we went through a process that Kenyans, you know, of our time may actually wish to forget, but we cannot run away from it. So until such a time when we are committed, because the anxiety, I told you last time, the anxiety in our manifestos will mean nothing if we are not committed to that particular process where we ensure that Kenya is peaceful. When you talk about TJRC or putting it in your manifesto, when you talk about national cohesion, and you're still the same people picking a microphone in front of people and talking about 40-something plus something, yet you're talking about enveloping national cohesion in your manifesto. Number one, it becomes just words. It lacks commitment and goodwill.
In politicians, that's not where we should be looking for aid when it comes to national cohesion.
In fact, Fred, I'll take you someplace far, and I know, and I know probably we may not use this example, but half of the time we've used examples from the architects of the Declaration of Independence in the United States. These were not just politicians. Many of them were not just politicians. Yes, you had people who had studied law, you know, the likes of Quincy Adams. You know, you had people who understood, but you also had, you know, people that were doctors, people who are peacekeepers. I mean, there was a conglomerate of people who wanted to come up with a document that would actually put the nation together, and that's what we are lacking. Half of the time we leave these things to people who are very good litigators. Yes. We forget to bring in people who are mitigators, and that's what we saw, you know, in the advent of 2008. People left, and what we saw, and at that time, Fred, we should have instituted these things, because you know why? We did not have an opposition. In 2007, coming to to the election in 2013, we did not have what you'd call a solid opposition. So there was a free ride on what President Moi Kibaki and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga would have agreed. And if TJRC, if the Agenda 4 issues, if national cohesion was at the core of their agreement, that we also, it should have been, and thank you, it should have been addressed by now.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for the analysis and discussions we've had this past hour. Thank you, Sandra Ochola, an analyst, Gabriel Muduma, and also Aidan Cabello, an analyst and also a candidate for Governor Isiolo County on an ODM party ticket. Those have been our analysts for this past hour. We now need to take a break. When we come back, we'll be discussing a peace initiative by Matatu operators, even as we continue taking this breaking news story where Gigi Kariuki has passed on. That's a senator for Laikipia County. Gigi Kariuki passed on in a Nairobi hospital today, aged 79 years old. He has served previously as cabinet minister in both the governments of Jomo Kenyatta and Daniel Arap Moi.